Two completely opposite fighting styles are about to collide in what might be the most technically fascinating super fight in years. On one side is Canelo, the methodical pressure artist who turns the ring into a hunting ground, cutting off escape routes and breaking opponents down with bone-crushing body shots and surgical counterpunches. On the other side stands Crawford, the switch-hitting phantom who treats every fight like a chess match, downloading patterns, creating impossible angles, and dismantling opponents with cold precision. This isn't another tired debate about power versus speed. This is something rarer, two completely different philosophies of dominance colliding on the same stage. Canelo's gospel is pressure and punishment. Crawford's creed is patience and adaptation. The real question isn't who hits harder or who's faster. It's how these systems of boxing mastery collide when there's nowhere left to hide. By the time we break down the technical layers of this matchup, you'll see why this fight is the purest example of styles making fights. Let's break down exactly how these two boxing philosophies stack up against each other, starting with the most obvious difference: their approach to generating power. Canelo doesn't just punch hard, he punches with purpose. Every shot to the body is designed to slow you down. Every left hook is thrown with the intention of ending conversations. At his natural weight of 168 pounds, he's carrying legitimate one-shot knockout power in both hands, but it's his bodywork that truly separates him from other power punchers. Crawford operates from a completely different power philosophy. He doesn't need to hurt you with every punch, because he's building towards something bigger. His power comes from precision and accumulation, finding angles that other fighters can't even see, let alone defend against. When Crawford hurts you, it's usually because he's set up the perfect shot through 3 or 4 moves of chess. The speed differential tells an even more interesting story. Crawford possesses genuine hand and foot speed that allows him to be first to the punch in most exchanges, but more importantly, his movement creates problems that go beyond just being fast. His ability to switch stances mid-combination doesn't just confuse opponents, it fundamentally changes the geometry of every exchange. Canelo's speed is different. It's economical, rather than flashy. He doesn't waste motion because he doesn't need to outrun anyone. Instead, he uses subtle footwork to cut off escape routes and positions himself to make every step his opponent takes work in his favor. It's the difference between a sprinter and a chess player moving pieces into perfect position. Their defensive systems represent two completely different schools of thought about how to avoid getting hit. Canelo's defense has evolved dramatically since his early career, especially after the Mayweather fight taught him hard lessons about head movement and positioning. He now combines textbook head movement with a high guard that allows him to slip punches while staying close enough to counter immediately. Crawford's defensive approach is built around creating confusion. His stance switching makes it nearly impossible for opponents to time him consistently, while his reflexes allow him to slip punches that he shouldn't even be able to see coming. Both men are incredibly difficult to hit cleanly, but they achieve this through methods that couldn't be more different. Now we get to the psychological warfare aspect, where both fighters operate as elite-level strategists, but with completely opposite approaches to breaking down their opponents mentally. Canelo's ring IQ manifests as a trap-setter's mentality. He doesn't just react to what opponents do. He engineers situations that force them into mistakes. Watch any Canelo fight closely, and you'll notice how subtle feints, shifts in rhythm, and even body language bait opponents into overcommitting, only for him to punish them with perfectly timed counters. He's not waiting for errors to appear. He's manufacturing them through psychological pressure and superior positioning. His mental game is about patience and inevitability, making opponents feel that every passing round tilts the fight further against them. Crawford's psychological approach works like a master codebreaker, slowly unraveling an encrypted puzzle. He deliberately starts fights in observation mode, absorbing timing, habits, and patterns while keeping his own intentions hidden. This isn't hesitation or starting slow, it's calculated data collection. Around the 4th or 5th round, when most fighters begin to fade, Crawford makes his most devastating adjustments. Once he downloads an opponent's operating system, he becomes nearly unstoppable because he's countering predictable behaviors rather than reacting to surprises. His mental edge lies in pure adaptability, the ability to instantly abandon what isn't working and pivot to a completely different tactical solution. The stamina and pacing dynamics expose perhaps the most crucial psychological battle of this fight. Crawford's reputation is built on becoming sharper and more dangerous as the rounds progress, fueled by his engine and the knowledge he's gathered. He sustains both physical output and mental clarity when others wilt. Canelo runs on a different energy economy. He invests heavily early, using power and pressure to plant doubt about whether opponents can endure 12 punishing rounds. The real question becomes whether Canelo can disrupt Crawford's analytical process before Crawford solves the puzzle. That's what makes this mental chess match so fascinating. Both fighters need time to implement their strategies, but in completely different ways. Canelo needs rounds to erode his opponent's body and spirit with cumulative damage. Crawford needs rounds to decode and dismantle patterns. The fighter who can impose their timeline on this contest will likely control the psychological warfare that decides the outcome. Here's where theory meets reality. When these contrasting styles actually collide in real time, the tactical battle becomes a fascinating sequence of action and counteraction across 3 distinct phases. The opening rounds will likely showcase the purest form of their opposing philosophies in action. Canelo will immediately begin his methodical ring-cutting operation, using angles and positioning to limit Crawford's movement options while establishing his jab and looking for opportunities to dig to the body. Meanwhile, Crawford will be operating in full reconnaissance mode, switching stances to gauge Canelo's reactions, testing different ranges, and deliberately moving laterally to avoid getting trapped against the ropes where Canelo's pressure game becomes most dangerous. The middle rounds represent the critical adjustment period where both fighters' ring intelligence gets truly tested. This is typically when Crawford begins implementing his downloaded data, potentially using his stance switches more aggressively to create openings that weren't available in the early rounds. But Canelo has shown throughout his career that he's not a static target. He makes his own mid-fight adjustments, often becoming more patient and surgical with his counterpunching when opponents try to establish rhythm. The technical question becomes whether Crawford's adaptability can stay one step ahead of Canelo's evolving pressure, or whether Canelo's ring-cutting skills can continue to limit Crawford's tactical options even as Crawford becomes more aggressive. The championship rounds reveal the ultimate test of each fighter's system under maximum physical and mental stress. Crawford historically becomes more dangerous in rounds 9 through 12 when his superior conditioning combines with complete tactical understanding to produce his most devastating work. However, Canelo's body work throughout the earlier rounds could potentially compromise Crawford's late fight engine, especially with the additional physicality that comes with fighting at super middleweight. The weight factor creates an entirely new variable. Crawford has never had to maintain his technical precision while absorbing the type of sustained body punishment that Canelo specializes in delivering. What makes this style clash particularly unpredictable is that neither fighter has faced an opponent who combines elite-level skills in the exact areas where their own style might be most vulnerable. Canelo has never fought anyone with Crawford's specific combination of switch-hitting ability and tactical adaptability. Crawford has never faced anyone with Canelo's combination of ring-cutting expertise and sustained body-punching power at this weight class. Beyond all the tactical theorizing, there are concrete technical realities that will ultimately determine how this fight unfolds, starting with the most significant factor that doesn't show up in highlight reels: Crawford's 2-division weight jump and what it means for his signature advantages. Crawford's switch-hitting mastery has always been built on superior speed and timing, but those attributes have never been tested while carrying an additional 15 to 20 pounds of muscle mass. The physics of boxing are unforgiving. Every additional pound affects hand speed, foot movement, and most critically, the recovery time between stance switches that make Crawford's style so effective. At welterweight, Crawford could seamlessly flow between orthodox and southpaw multiple times per round without any noticeable energy cost. At super middleweight, those transitions may become more deliberate and less frequent, potentially reducing the very unpredictability that defines his fighting identity. The power differential creates technical complications that go far beyond simple punch statistics. Canelo's body shots aren't just painful, they systematically reduce an opponent's ability to execute complex technical movements as the fight progresses. Crawford's style requires precise footwork, quick stance changes, and sustained upper body movement to create angles. If Canelo's early body work begins to compromise Crawford's mobility, it creates a cascading technical breakdown where each subsequent round becomes more difficult for Crawford to execute his game plan. The question isn't whether Crawford can handle Canelo's power initially, but whether he can maintain his technical precision while absorbing accumulated body punishment over 12 rounds. The defensive adaptability factor presents the most intriguing technical puzzle of the entire fight. Canelo has built his recent success around opponents who eventually fall into predictable patterns that he can exploit with his counterpunching. Crawford has built his career around refusing to become predictable, constantly presenting new looks and angles throughout fights. This creates a technical paradox. What happens when an elite pattern reader meets an opponent whose entire style is built around pattern disruption? Neither fighter has been in this exact technical scenario before, which means both will be operating somewhat outside their comfort zones. The stamina versus damage equation represents the final technical reality that could determine everything. Crawford's conditioning advantage is well documented, but it's always been tested against opponents who fight at his natural weight class. Canelo's power and pressure have proven effective against bigger, stronger opponents, but never against someone with Crawford's specific combination of movement and adaptability. What we've just analyzed represents everything that can be measured, studied, and predicted about this fight, and yet it barely scratches the surface of what will actually happen when these two elite systems collide for real. Both fighters bring championship-level skills that have been refined through years of elite competition, but they've packaged those skills in completely opposite approaches to the sport. Canelo has perfected the art of controlled violence, using superior positioning and devastating power to systematically break down opponents who have nowhere left to hide. Crawford has mastered the science of tactical warfare, using adaptability and unpredictability to solve problems that other fighters can't even identify. The fascinating technical reality is that we genuinely don't know how these specific styles will interact at this weight class, because neither fighter has ever faced this exact combination of challenges. Canelo has never had to maintain his pressure game against someone who can legitimately change the tactical landscape mid-fight through stance switching. Crawford has never had to execute his complex technical adjustments while absorbing the type of sustained physical punishment that comes with fighting a natural super middleweight who specializes in bodywork. This uncertainty isn't a weakness in our analysis, it's exactly what makes great fights great. The best technical breakdowns in the world can't account for the variables that only emerge when two elite fighters push each other into uncharted territory. I want to know which fighters' techniques you're most excited to see tested, and if you want more deep dives like this into boxing's biggest fights, make sure you're subscribed because we're just getting started.